Perfect. Okay, thanks. So, thanks for having me today. Good to see so many people here. I even have the feeling the venue is a bit small for the event, but well, we'll see next year. So, this talk, it's about the zero-day market. This is a field, a part of the internet that I find fascinating, mostly because I enjoy hacking, I enjoy reading about hacking, I enjoy talking about hacking, and this is a sort of a hidden field in the internet, this dark corner of the net where people find zero days, trade them. They used to be traded for beer and pizza, and now they're being traded for hundreds of thousands of dollars. So much has changed there, and this is having an impact on the internet as we know it as well. So today I'll give some background on what zero days are, how they're traded. We'll have a look at what that market looks like currently, which is hard to find data on because of its secretive nature. But in the past year we've had some very interesting leaks from companies involved in this business that give us a lot of data to talk about and shed some light on the subject. Then we'll discuss how this is relevant to us, if it is relevant to us, and if something should or needs to be done about it. So I'm Christiaan Ottow, I'm CTO at Pine Digital Security. What we do in a nutshell is we do application security, so mostly in the form of penetration testing, code audits, reviews, things like that. We also do managed hosting and software development for customers where security plays above average role. So we focus on the development of secure software and hosting that stuff as well. So 0 days, there are many definitions of 0 day, what a 0 day is. Some people feel very religiously about this, how you define 0 day. If you're one of those people, I'm sorry for you, but this is the definition I'll be using. So a vulnerability that has not been publicly disclosed. And here's a look at a timeline of vulnerabilities. So at some point in time, a vulnerability is created by an unknowing programmer who commits his latest code and enters a vulnerability into the code base. After that, at some point, discovery follows. Sometimes this takes years, like in the case of Heartbleed. Sometimes this is right after the commit, because there are groups watching the commit logs of all popular open source projects, and they go through every commit, they find the bug, and immediately start working with it. Then after discovery, an exploit is written for certain target systems, and that's then used. We're all pre-disclosure now, so in this period there's a risk here for systems that are vulnerable to this vulnerability. Then at some point, hopefully, there is disclosure. Sometimes there is, sometimes there isn't. After which the broader public knows about it and the vendor knows about it and can start acting on it. The vendor will then at some point issue a patch, and then the patch is installed on systems, and then people start becoming secure. So in the whole period from discovery to patch installed, there is a window of opportunity for people who want to make use of these vulnerabilities, and they are called 0 day in the period before disclosure. So that's the most interesting period in my mind. It's hard to get data on this, as I said. Here are some figures from two vulnerability disclosure programs. So these are vendors who actually buy your 0 days from you and then disclose them. And their business model is that they provide protection, advanced protection to customers. So they create intrusion detection systems, and they provide protection against 0 days, which is only the 0 days that they buy, of course, because they then develop protection for it and push that to their customers' IDS systems. In 2013, some figures came out, and the average time to disclosure is in the most right column. So this shows that there's a long period of 0 day status for a bug before it's disclosed to the public. Although in the case of these programs, usually disclosure is at the same time as patch availability. So that's the good news. ZDI published some more figures in 2015. They have disclosed over 2,000 vulnerabilities, while in 2013 it was only 1,400. So there's a large uptick in disclosures. And they noted in 2010 that 30% of the vendors that they were in contact with took more than a year to patch after they told them about the vulnerability. So they implemented a 180-day automatic disclosure policy. So they would contact the vendor, say, here's a vulnerability, we will disclose no matter what you do in 180 days. After that, in 2013, only 6 vendors went over those 180 days. So this is a very interesting mechanic in the disclosure. And 5 were over 120 days, which led them to conclude, well, we can make the disclosure limit 120 days, which it is now. This is from a Symantec research. They did research into vulnerabilities that were disclosed, and using certain data that they had from antivirus, went back to see how long has this vulnerability actually been exploited before we knew about it. And their conclusion was that 0 days live 312 days in the wild on average. So they had a very small data set to work with, so, but it's an interesting figure nonetheless. So these are some commercial suppliers in the area of 0 days, and they're in the business of not disclosing. So they're mostly brokers. You sell them your 0 days for much higher figures than to the disclosure firms, and they will then find customers that pay them even more for those 0 days. It's interesting to note that most of these companies have come into existence only in the last 2 or 3 years, or have started doing 0 days in the past few years. And there are some defense contractors in there as well. There are some startups. And then you have a large number of independent brokers who only work based on their network, their contacts, and not on public listing of service. So why do we see such an uptick in 0 days? Well, for me, I think the reason is simple. This is a figure from Cisco about the number of internet-connected devices. As long as that number keeps growing so explosively, of course, it's more interesting to find ways to intrude onto those systems. And I think this is the main reason, mostly for the pricing going up. We'll have a look at pricing later on. But where you would get a beer for your 0 day 10 years ago, you would get 2,000 euros for it 5 years ago, you'll now easily get 30,000 euros for it. And I think we have these people to thank for that. So what drives this growth? Well, as I said, number of targets increases, so that drives growth in an upward direction. The government interest, also the return that you get per target. So if you're a government agency and you're in this business, the return you get from a single target is much higher than 10 years ago, because people are doing so much more digitally. They're doing so much more online. If you manage to backdoor someone's phone now, 10 years ago you would have some messages and some calls, and now you'll have most of their digital life. The only thing pushing in the other direction is the skill required because of all the anti-exploitation techniques that are being implemented. It's becoming harder and harder once you find a bug somewhere to actually build an exploit that works reliably across systems. A good example is Stage Fright, the famous Android bug that was published last month. The best exploits for this have a 50% chance of working. So Hacking Team. Who has heard of Hacking Team before today? Okay, good. Then I take it everybody has heard what happened to them as well. I think they still exist. At least their website does. Hacking Team was an Italian vendor of surveillance software, not regular surveillance software. But basically, this is what their brochure says about their system. So, in case you want to know anything about anyone's bytes, you can buy their software, and basically, they'll take care of that for you. So they do audio recording on phones, Skype calls, FaceTime, things like that. Keystroke logging, GPS tracking, command execution, of course, on mobile devices and laptops and whatever. And they had an impressive list of customers, including some very oppressive regimes. People you should perhaps not be selling to, like Bahrain, Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan. And there are documented cases of how these capabilities were used to put dissidents in jail and do worse things to them. They were breached in July, and someone had been in their network for a few months, I guess, and dumped 400 gigabytes of their data, which is all their mail spools, their the source code of their control panel center, the source code of their payload delivery systems, the contracts they had, so pretty much everything. And this gives us a very interesting data trove to go through to learn more about the 0 day market. For instance, they had these suppliers, but they had big troubles finding suppliers. It was difficult for them. They didn't have the skill in-house to find these vulnerabilities and to build exploits for them. So they had to go out into the market. They first tried Vupen, the most well-known firm in this area. They've been doing this for a long time. They're a France-based firm. But they only got the second-rate bugs from them at high prices, because Vupen has subscription services for governments where all the good bugs go. And then smaller vendors like Hacking Team won't get the good stuff. Then they went to Vulnerabilities Brokerage International, a new player in the field. They had some very interesting bugs, but they were all 100,000 and up, and Hacking Team thought this to be too expensive, so they didn't really buy anything in the end. Then they went to NetRegard, which is an American company. They state on their website how they only sell to US customers, and they sold to Hacking Team as well. A few days after the Hacking Team breach, NetRegard closed down its complete vulnerability sales program. And they bought some things from NetRegard, and then there was this independent, Vitaly Toropov. He used to work for ZDI, one of the disclosure programs mentioned earlier. But he's gone solo since, and he finds vulnerabilities and sells them directly to people like Hacking Team without a broker in the middle. So this drives up his profit, I guess, or drives down the price for Hacking Team. And they bought actually 3 Flash Player 0 days from Vitaly. Well, here's a price list from 2012 when de Grug, a famous figure in these circles, did a very rare interview with Forbes. And Andy Greenberg compiled this price list from it. What's interesting to me is the pricing also shows how complex exploitation is. So apparently, or how rare the bugs are. It can be either. So apparently, Adobe Reader is not that hard to find bugs in and to exploit. And iOS is very hard to find bugs in and or exploit. And Android is a bit near the easy side, and Chrome, of course, with its sandbox and Internet Explorer with its sandbox are on the high side as well. Actually, Hacking Team tried to procure iOS exploits, but they couldn't find suppliers for this. NetRegard said that they were supply constricted for iOS vulnerabilities. Once they had them, they would go for up to 1 million to government customers. So. These are some more recent pricing figures from Hacking Team. So in the email conversations, we see not only the people like NetRegard would send their catalog encrypted to Hacking Team, and they would forward it internally unencrypted. So in the mail spools, we have all these catalogs, and we have the negotiations as well, because they would go internally, of course. So for an Adobe Reader plus Sandbox Escape, that had a 100K list price, they negotiated it down to 80.5K and bought it at some point. A Sandbox Escape, that's interesting as well to note that you have the vulnerability in the product, and then you have vulnerabilities in the sandboxing around that product, which for Windows application is different than for application that does sandboxing within its own application. So for Chrome, you need a Sandbox Escape, and you need a way to break out of the browser itself. So you'd have a Flash 0 day and a Sandbox Escape to get to the host. And these were sold separately. So you could package the Sandbox Escapes and the vulnerability, the exploits on top of each other. And the interesting thing as well is these prices are for exclusivity on the bug. So if the Grug sells you this vulnerability, he will not sell it to anyone else. These prices are for non-exclusive vulnerabilities. So 90K to 100K for a Sandbox Escape non-exclusive. So you know for sure others are using this as well, and chances of detection are pretty high. Then they bought 3 Flash Player 0 days from Vitaly Toropov, ranging from 39K to 45K. Yeah, they were pretty happy with him, I guess. I don't know if this is readable. This is a piece from the NetRegard catalog. They were in the business of giving cool names to their vulnerabilities as well, as one does nowadays. And there are lots of interesting notes with the vulnerabilities. So they would add monthly to this catalog and remove the things that had been purchased. The top one is pretty expensive. They have a Sandbox Escape called Highwood, which was found via manual audit, so reaching through a fuzzer should be impossible. So that drives the price up. You cannot find this bug through fuzzing, so you'll have to wait for someone doing a manual audit on it to find this stuff. This is from Zerodium, which is a new company. They were founded even after the Hacking Team dump, and they're pretty ballsy. They were founded by the guy who also runs Fupan, and they just put their price list on Twitter, because why not? And apparently they're not very interested in Java, yeah. So given that this has become a business, there's a business model around it, and these companies, these brokers, they have the things that you would expect from a business. So you would have a few weeks of acceptance testing. If you decide to buy a vulnerability, you've reached agreement on the price, you will get it, and you'll be allowed to test it for a few weeks. They'll have support for implementing it. So if you fail to exploit your target, you'll have someone from NetRegard come and help you with that. If the bug is actually patched straight after you buying it, you'll get a replacement bug for free. So Vitaly Toropov actually did this. They got 4 Flash Player 0 days from him because one was patched 2 weeks after they bought it. And the second bug that they got was in the same piece of code, actually. So Hacking Team was a bit worried, saying, aren't they going to patch this as well? And Vitaly said, no, this is Adobe. I know how they patch. They'll never patch this second bug. So. And you'd have phased payments, so 40% on acceptance, then 25 or 20% after a while, and then 40% again if you're still happy after 3 months. Based on these leaks, I've tried to piece together a sketch of the actors that are involved in this business. So at the core, you have the researcher, who can be part of any of the other actors as well, of course. But say Job finds an interesting 0 day, then he could either go to an exploit pack vendor, so those have been around for a pretty long time. You can sell exploits there, and they'll send them to pen testing companies who use them during pen tests. If they use things like Immunity's Canvas, which is a tool that you can put your exploits in and then use them in a test, or things like that. Hacking Team tried buying from those vendors as well, but they weren't satisfied because the exploits were targeted at pen testing, so they weren't very stealth and they weren't very aimed at maintaining presence for a longer period. So they were really pen testing stuff. You can go to the dark markets. There are some interesting articles about how on Tor dark markets you can buy drugs, guns, and 0 days. This is a combination now. So. There are researchers who go to the vendor directly. So either by full disclosure, dropping it on a full disclosure mailing list, or by going into a bug bounty program. So with Microsoft, Google, Facebook, all these companies, you have bug bounty programs where you'll get a reward for your vulnerability. At Google, it'll be at most $3,000 and lead dollars. So it's not like the prices you get with the brokers. And Google Project Zero is doing this, of course. They have a team of, I think, 10 highly skilled auditors and exploit developers, and they are just full-time finding bugs in software that everyone uses and reporting those after 90 days, I think. And then you have the brokers. So the whole list of companies that we just saw and some independents. Even Kevin Mitnick has set up his own line of vulnerabilities. And they will sell to rich intelligence agencies. The Grug explains this in his famous interview. He says, I've tried the Russian crime syndicates and this and that, but in the end, the Western intelligence, it pays so good, and they're so reliable. As a customer, it's easy to deal with them, so that's where the vulnerabilities go. And to the offensive product vendors who have the money for it. So I don't know of many of those, but at least Hacking Team and Gamma International are out there. Gamma is the maker of FinFisher, which was quite famous as well. Both have been breached in the last year, so if you're thinking about starting a company like this, maybe think again. And they will sell to poorer intelligence agencies or to law enforcement agencies. On the day of the Hacking Team breach, they had a demo scheduled at our national police. Our Secretary of Security refuses to answer questions about what that demo was about. So, a quick show of hands. Who of you thinks that this whole trading in 0 days is an immoral thing? Who thinks it's perfectly okay? Who thinks something should be done about it? That's a few. Well, this is a difficult subject. It's a bit like with weapons, of course, building weapons. And only a difference with 0 days is they are much like weapons, only they're only interesting for offensive purposes. You don't need 0 days for defense, never. There are pen testing companies that use them occasionally, and there's a very slim case for this. In case a company says, we have a very large budget and we want to test not only the security of our systems, but as well our monitoring and our incident response and the whole chain, and we want nobody to know about it. then you might need 0 days to do your test. But that's a very small business case. It's a very small percentage of the market. So to me, the central question is, who benefits from having those 0 days, and who benefits from having them fixed? And I think all of us here are on the side of benefiting from when they're fixed. Of course, if you decide to do something about this and you're able to, you won't stop the spies and the criminals, but you will make it harder for companies like Hacking Team to procure those. So, when thinking about what can be done about it, Dan Geer poses this central question. Actually, he's paraphrasing Bruce Schneier, but the question is, are vulnerabilities dense or sparse? Because if there are only a few of them, then you can set about finding and fixing them and have a big impact on this market. If there are many of them, well, then you can't. Then it's a waste of time and energy. So the security people thinking about this are divided into those two camps, the dense and the sparse camp. There are very smart people in both camps. I don't know which will prove to be true. But in the sparse camp, we have an approach proposed by Dan Geer saying corner the market. The US government should buy all 0 days at 10 times the price that the market is offering now. And by doing so, they should gain control over the market. So they should be able to control the supply chain, and they should be able to control the pricing, and then we'll get rid of this problem. And they should disclose them all, of course. That's part of this plan as well. Another approach is to drain the offensive stockpile. So what if we can find these 0 days faster than the people who are selling them through these shady means? Now, this is what Google Project Zero is doing. Chris Evans, who heads the team, made this statement saying, people deserve to use the internet without fear that vulnerabilities out there can ruin their privacy with a single website visit. This is their mission. In the run-up to this talk, I spoke to one of the guys at Project Zero and asked him, do you really believe that bugs are this sparse, that you can actually have an impact? Well, he said he did. So people like to join this because they're not only getting a good salary, because they belong to the top of their class, but also because they believe they're having this positive impact. Another one is we can try to tweak the levers of this industry. Kate Moussouris is one of the founders of HackerOne, the bug disclosure program. This year at RSA, she presented the first system dynamics research into the vulnerability market, which is all economics. I don't understand a single thing of it. But she had this interesting graph showing what she did at Microsoft. So with Internet Explorer 10, there was a bug bounty program that went live after release. So after the release and manufacturing point in time, the bounty program went live and people submitted their bugs for money. Small fees, but this is a vendor doing it. With Internet Explorer 11, Katie proposed to start the bug bounty program when the first beta went online. And you can see the spike in reports comes during the beta period. So with IE 11, people weren't stockpiling their 0 days to get rewarded after go live. They were actually submitting them during the beta period when nobody was using the product for real yet. So this is a good place to have the bugs fixed. And there might be more levers that can be, knobs that can be turned in this industry, because people are motivated by more than just where they can get the highest bid for their 0 day. And then you have regulation. Well, I'm not a lawyer and I'm a bit short on time, so just know there's a lot going on here. It's sort of the Crypto Wars 2 debate in a different context. But Wassenaar agreement is an agreement between 42 countries on how we should regulate the sales in controlled substances. No, not just substances, controlled things, among which are intrusion malware, intrusion exploits, and IP surveillance. And the US is currently discussing its implementation of this agreement and going all wrong about it. So basically, if you do exploit research only, you will need an export license. And yeah, the problem with dual use. You can use them for research, you can use them for offensive purposes, so it's a bit iffy. Then there are the people who think bugs are dense, there are many of them, and you'll never succeed if you try to fix them. So Bas Alberts is one of those people. He has a famous rant that he posted last month going against Project Zero and the likes. And his conclusion is interesting, and I think it's something that does not actually contradict the whole bugs are sparse standpoint, but containment is the name of the game, not prevention. So he says here, for For Spender, it's eradicating entire bug classes, and for network engineers, it's understanding each and every exfiltration path on your network and segmenting accordingly. So he's more of the containment standpoint, saying we'll have to accept the fact that there are zero-day exploits out there and that there are vulnerabilities in everything you build and everything you run, and you'll just have to plan accordingly and build your systems accordingly, which I think is good advice together with the let's eradicate 0 days. So my conclusions from this are, well, there's a new market that is shady at best. And the interesting thing is that it involves actors from government, from crime, and from commerce, and they're all on all sides of the diagram. Well, maybe government isn't selling, but for the rest, everybody is on every side. And there's a legal battle being fought over this, and I think the outcome of this will have a big impact on what our kids' internet will look like, or our kids' internet. Whether we move toward the walled garden, where there's no privacy but absolute security, or whether we keep it as sort of a wild west where anything goes, or whether we manage to find something in between where we can have some confidence in the systems that we're running without sacrificing all privacy. Questions? Erik.
I'm going first. Thank you so much, Christiaan. This is very, very insightful, and for me personally, well, let's give him a big applause. This is a topic I know nothing about, but now I do a little bit. So I was wondering, what is the going price for an OpenBSD 0 day?
You're asking for a friend, right?
Well, it depends. Is it remote code execution?
Well, quote me for local and remote.
I think you can get a pretty high price for that, because the pricing it's a lot for. I've shown the end user stuff only, so the desktop systems, but the catalogs also include server-side vulnerabilities. There are some companies that focus on server-side vulnerabilities, and people like the NSA are very interested in those, and they're pretty rare on OpenBSD. So, yeah.
Thank you. Erik.
Thanks for the interesting presentation. Can you explain a bit about what the Dutch government is doing in this regard? Are you aware if they are a buyer, and if so, are they looking at just for foreign affairs, so foreign exploration, or are they also aiming at domestic use?
Well, if they are buying, it would be in the defense part of the spectrum, so it would be MIVD, because they have the offensive mandate. The AIVD doesn't, and law enforcement in the Netherlands doesn't have the privilege to hack back yet, as has been proposed earlier. So if they're buying, it's the MIVD, and I have no idea what they're doing. I think in the Ivo Opstelter has published the cyber direction mission thingy, and his standpoint was along that of the White House that we shouldn't stockpile 0 days as a rule, with exceptions for arbitrary cases. So, yeah.
With exceptions for the rest. Yeah. Any more questions?
Yeah, perhaps I can comment on that. I used to be MIVD. I'm now the security officer of LeaseWeb, and they are investigating in it. That's all I can say, because I know they are not that far ahead. They are building up a cyber command, as they call it, and they are investigating it. But it's also political sensitive point, so they won't tell us if they do. But as far as I know, from my insights, is that they are investigating it big time. But
do you know if they're investigating it as a client or as a researcher? So are
both.
They going to
both. Yeah, both sides.
Well, I have not so much a question as more a comment, I think. Earlier you were asking if we think this is a moral thing. I think the least we can say is that we can benefit as a defense because we can find out what strategies work and which don't. So if you look at the list of prices for operating systems. You can find out what strategies for defense operating systems work and which don't, because it's reflected in the price of the vulnerabilities.
Yeah, you can see Apple's strategy working there.
So
it's interesting to see this is a force in driving vendors towards more secure software. On the other hand, we don't have, it's a sort of a checks and balances system then, but we don't have this same system for privacy. So what you see with iOS, where you sacrifice privacy in favor of security, there isn't a dynamic like this that pushes on the privacy side yet, I think. So that's tricky.
One more question, if there is one. All right. Thank you so much, Christiaan.
Thanks.